You pack up your bag, you make the trek into the training center, only to discover there isn't another human being for you to train with. Now what? I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. And I've been really lucky throughout my career to work in front of the cameras as a professional wrestler, ring announcer, referee, and commentator. And I've worked behind the scenes too, as a promoter, booker, agent, coach, and consultant. And if you are as passionate about professional wrestling as I am, and you're never done learning all about it, I want to invite you to join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe down below and enable notifications so you find out every single time that I publish a new video. Today's topic comes from the comments section. It was sent in by a great viewer just like you, asking about a scenario I happen to be very familiar with. A little context I want to share with you on this exact topic. The first real break I ever got in professional wrestling came thanks to Blaine DeSantis. I auditioned for his company when I was just 2 years in. And part of going to work for Blaine's Pennsylvania Championship Wrestling was agreeing to this term. Everyone had to train at least one night a week at a pro wrestling school. And there were a variety of pre-selected training centers where you could go to fulfill that requirement. The one nearest to me was situated just north of my hometown of Reading, PA. Out in a mushroom field, the Mest brothers oversaw a training center that was inside an industrial building. And as fate would have it, even 25 plus years later, those mushroom fields and that exact building with a school run by the Mest brothers are still in the exact same place. More times than I can recall, I would turn up for training there only to discover there wasn't another human being for me to work with. I had access to the ring and to a training dummy, by which I do not mean a person of low intelligence, I mean an inanimate object that was affectionately referred to as Billy Backbump, and that was it. So if you're hearing that and you wonder, Mike, what kind of pro wrestling training can you possibly do given those conditions? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's exactly what today's video is about. Naturally, there's some very obvious things that you could be doing in the ring. All the tumbling exercises, ring presence exercises, or blow-up drills that you know that use the ropes and the corners. Of course, you can do any of those solo with slight modifications, and you can just add a little bit of variety to keep yourself from getting bored. But there are 5 other things I want to touch on that often made up those practice sessions I would have with Billy Backbump back in the day, in case you find yourself in a situation where you don't have another human training mate to work with. For the first of these things, I don't even want you to get in the ring. Stay out on the floor, but we'll use the corner post of the ring. And here's what we're going to use it for. Honing your strikes. So let's start by throwing some pro wrestling punches at that corner post. Your objective is this. Make contact with the post. It might even ring out with a dull sound when you touch it, but you don't want to throw those punches with so much force that you end up busting up your own knuckles or hurting your hand on contact. This will ensure that you develop accuracy without throwing some potatoes. And we're going to alternate those punches you're doing with sets of kicks. So you throw soul butts, roundhouses, super kicks, whatever the case might be, practice them against the corner post with the same objective. You always want to make contact, but you don't want to be bruising up your shin or your instep or the sole of your foot. Same rules apply. Make sure that you've got accuracy, but what you don't want is force. After you've worked on your punches and kicks, I really want you to take advantage of the fact that you have an empty wrestling ring all to yourself and no line to contend with. When you're in a really full training class with 10 or 15 or 20 other people, you get your one attempt to do the technique, and then you go around and get at the back of the line, and you wait several minutes for your next attempt at that. But the reason I was able to master so many difficult rope techniques early in my career, specifically slingshots, springboards, and the spaceman, that's the no-handed leap to the top rope, is because of all the dedicated hours of uninterrupted time I had training by myself in an empty ring. It wasn't that I had to wait 5 minutes for my next attempt at the springboard. I could try hundreds of times in an hour because there was no line. There was no one else that needed a turn. I could just fail and fail and fail and fail until I discovered a key to success on my own. And when I would achieve those breakthroughs by myself, I felt tremendous satisfaction, like I had conquered something. And even to this day, I believe part of the reason why my form is so strong on those exact techniques is because it took me hundreds, probably thousands of attempts to master it. Not only did I master those rope techniques during solo training sessions, but that was also the time I began to develop all my flying moves. Moves where I jumped off the top rope, like a flying drop kick, a frog splash, a moonsault, and a swanton. And I learned to do them into an empty ring with no crash pad, because I never wanted the impact of that move to surprise me. If I was called on to do the move and miss it during a match, I wanted to know exactly what I was in for and how to land it safely. And I learned to do that through constant repetition. Only after I had perfected it with no crash pad would I introduce the training dummy into the equation so that I could learn to aim it accurately. But that was only after I had perfected the move without anyone, not even Billy Backbump, in the ring. If you have access to a training dummy, there's a lot more you can do than just develop the aim and the accuracy of your flying moves. And just saying that out loud makes me realize this sounds like it's about to veer off into weird territory, but stick with me, people. Let's say your training dummy has some weight to it and roughly a humanoid shape. If so, you can practice all the classical suplex forms on it. By that I mean those where the back bridge is fundamental to the shape of the suplex, like the Fisherman, the Northern Lights, the German, etc. So not only do you want to practice for your back bridge form, are you up on your tiptoes, are your hips high in the sky, etc., but your ideal landing position should put your opponent on their shoulder blades without impacting the crown of your skull. So when you practice, you want to make sure you can do it without spiking your own head. There's one last thing from these solo training sessions that I'd like to share with you, although with a bit of trepidation. Before we dive into that, if you'd like access to more of the educational multimedia I make for fellow professional wrestlers, you'd like things like excerpts from my books, essays, podcasts, or seminars of mine, please consider joining us over on Patreon. I release lots of exclusives every single month to my patrons, and we'd love to have you join our community. I'm going to link you to it down below. This last thing I want to talk about, I am not recommending to you. And the reason I'm not recommending it to you is because you could easily be hurt doing it. However, all wrestling training has a certain inherent risk, and I want to tell you about a way in which I overcame a weakness in my game. Back in my rookie years, my weakest fundamental by far was my flip bump. I got a lot of criticism that there wasn't enough height underneath it. And so, when I had access to a ring and tons of uninterrupted time, that was something that I would practice. And I did it in this way, which again, I'm not recommending to you. But what I actually did was take a folding chair and open it up, and I put it between myself and the center of the ring. And I learned to jump over the chair into a flip bump. Because I was so scared of landing on the chair, I developed my jump to the point that I could clear it and still land the flip bump perfectly. And thus, it went from being one of the weakest points in my game to being one of my strengths. But the only reason that was possible was because I got in hundreds and hundreds of repetitions jumping over a folding chair and still doing the form correctly. If your training sessions, solo or otherwise, always result in you being covered in bruises, scrapes, or cuts, watch my video on protective gear by clicking here right now. Or if you'd like more information on the performance and structure of wrestling matches, check out my new book. Toolbox Building Better Pro Wrestling is available on Amazon as an ebook or on Audible as an audiobook, read to you by me.